live this morning with Minister Lisa MacLeod. In addition, we are joined by over 1,000 stakeholders from throughout the province listening in. To ask a question live this morning, simply press 3 on your phone's keypad. Once again, press 3 to ask a question at any time during the town hall. My name is Eric, and I'll be the facilitator for the town hall today. During this live telephone town hall, we do encourage you to get involved and ask questions. Minister MacLeod chose this format as this is an interactive town hall with you, which means she wants to hear from you. Minister MacLeod and the Ministry of Heritage, Tourism, Sports and Culture Industries have made it a priority to engage and connect with you and other stakeholders to update you on the current status of COVID-19 and its impact on different sectors of our economy. Our intention is to get as many questions as possible. You can ask a question at any time by pressing 3 on your phone's keypad. At that time, someone will take your name and place you in the question queue. Now again, we're still having new people join us. Welcome to the Ministry of Heritage, Tourism, Sports and Culture Industries Stakeholder Telephone Town Hall. We are live this morning with Minister Lisa MacLeod. In addition, we are joined by over 1,000 stakeholders from throughout the province listening in. We do want to remind everyone joining us that you can ask a live question by pressing 3 on your phone's keypad. Now at this time, I am going to turn over the event to today's moderator, Tim Hudak, so he can open up the town hall and introduce the minister. Tim, please go ahead.
Well, thanks very much, Eric, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's call. I suspect many of you were on the call that Minister MacLeod had last week with folks who work in the heritage, sport, tourism, and culture industries. Many of you are new. As Eric said, we're already over 1,000 people on this line. So I'm Tim Hudak. I'm CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, representing Ontario's 80,000 realtors. But I think Minister MacLeod asked me to do this because I've been in her seat. I had the honor of serving as your minister back in the early 2000s. Was the Minister of Cabinet Table for Tourism, Culture and Recreation at the time of 9/11, and then was there at the Cabinet Table during SARS. And both of those were crises enough impacted you, your business, your livelihood. But this is worse today than both of those combined, far worse. So I was honored when the minister asked me to take on this call. And I tell you, somebody who's known Minister MacLeod for 15 plus years now as a colleague and a friend, there's no better person to be in your corner fighting for you at Cabinet, at Queen's Park, than Lisa MacLeod. I know she believes passionately in the work that you do. She celebrates the great talent, beauty, and heritage of this fantastic province, and she's there working hard for you around the clock each and every day. A couple things that have unfolded since we last spoke. Number one, Premier Ford declared the further expansion of the stay-at-home, declaring essential services only to be open. That's another hit to many folks on this call and your employees and your team members. And then, of course, there was a financial statement by the Finance Minister Rod Phillips yesterday. The Minister will provide further details momentarily. Before I introduce the Minister for opening comments, again, if you have questions to ask, we did a bunch of questions last time from listeners. Press 3 on your phone. We will queue you up. And we have 4 special guests who are leaders that many of you know in these sectors. They will also ask questions of the minister, and I'll introduce them for their questions a bit later on. But Beth Potter, President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association. David Shoemaker, he's the CEO and Secretary General of the Canadian Olympic Committee. Jim Mirkopoulos, who is the Vice President of Cinespace Film Studios. And Josh Passages, who's the Director and CEO of the Royal Ontario Museum, ROM. They'll join us and ask Minister questions as well. Folks, we'll get on with today's call. Minister MacLeod, thank you again so much for your transparency, coordinating these calls across the province on a regular basis. The floor is now yours.
Thank you all for joining me today, and I'd especially like to say thank you, Tim, for joining us again as our moderator and for providing background advice to me as a former minister. I'd also like to say thanks to our special guests, Beth Potter, President and CEO of TAIO, David Shoemaker, CEO of the Canadian Olympic Committee, Jim Mirkopoulos, VP of Cinespace, and Josh Passages, of the CEO of the ROM. This is a very broad ministry, and I appreciate that there are many questions all of you have on the line. Some are very specific, which is why I have asked leaders from each of the tourism, sport, culture, and heritage files to join me on the line today. It's very important that if you do not get to ask your question today, it doesn't mean it won't be answered. So please send it to minister.macleod@ontario.ca. Again, that is minister.macleod@ontario.ca, and MacLeod is MACLEOD. My team has been working around the clock to get to as many of you as quickly as possible. We know that in these uncertain times that an answer Even one that doesn't give you everything you want can make all the difference. And I know that there is a lot of anxiety right now, both with this public health crisis as well as the economic fallout, both happening at a rapid pace, forcing changes in everything we do as a society. Nothing in this crisis has been predictable. But as my friend Jim Diodati, the mayor of Niagara Falls, said to me this week about the collapse of tourism in one of the most identifiable and visited destinations in the world, he said, this is not a time to panic, but to plan. And I promise you, as your minister, I heed that advice for our recovery. As I said last week, our suite of sectors and industries were hit first and hardest in the economy. I know many on this call are suffering. I'm acutely aware of that. Wondering if you're going to be able to keep the doors open, hoping for stability in all of this instability, wanting answers now, even as the questions shift from one moment to the next with every new COVID-19 case and order from various levels of government. Since we met last week in this very forum, even more has changed. Ontario has declared the shutdown of all non-essential businesses, and we also delivered our spring economic statement. I know these measures can sometimes create even more questions, so let me tell you about the direct action the ministry is taking and what our government as a whole is doing. Our allocation in the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries has grown by nearly $200 million to $1.65 billion this year. I've repurposed the Tourism Development Fund to be the Tourism Development and Recovery Fund, and I've increased the funding from $500,000 to $1.5 million so we can give immediate relief to small tourism attractions in Ontario. I want to thank Glenn Shackleton of Haunted Walks in Ottawa for his efforts and ideas. I'm working with industry partners on an online marketplace and town center for all Ontarians to access concerts, art, digital gallery, and museum tours and attraction pre-purchases. I've made an initial investment of $150,000 to match community contributions to give musicians across Ontario a platform to do concerts from the safety of their homes. This initiative is called Ontario Live, and we're working with partners from Shopify, Universal, CBC, Bell, and others in the industry, as well as my agencies Destination Ontario and Ontario Creates. The first phase of Ontario Live is expected to roll out next week. I want to thank my friend and artist Miranda Mulholland for inspiring this concept after she shared with me the economic toll her canceled concerts will take on her for the next several months. Destination Ontario is actively working on a marketing program that will let the world know that when they are ready to travel and we are a safe environment to accept them back, we will be ready. Thank you to Barry Averick of Hot Dogs and the Giller Prize for reminding us that we need to send that message out. I'm pleased to announce today that our government will be allowing all licensed restaurants, bars, and pubs to sell and deliver unopened alcohol at their establishments. I appreciate the advice to Tony Eleni of Orma for this suggestion, and I hope this helps many of our establishments during this period. In working with our hotel associations, we have developed an inventory of rooms which can be made available throughout the province in the event hospitals, violence against women shelters, human trafficking shelters, long-term care facilities, or developmental services homes require availability due to capacity and or social distancing. We provided these lists to the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and the Ministry of Children and Community and Social Services. Yesterday's economic statement earmarked $341 million if this is required. Colin Morrison and Terry Mundell have been very effective in supporting this effort. For our film and TV industry, we are revising regulations so we can allow contract and freelance workers to receive Ontario's 3 refundable film and TV tax credits, while at the same time working to streamline the time it takes to complete them. This is something I continue to work on with our TV and film advisory panel that meets weekly. For our emerging artists, we are retooling our $7 million Ontario Music Fund to get more money into your hands immediately during this crisis. I am grateful to Stuart Johnson Seema and Graham Henderson of Music Canada for their advice on this. As we know, the Olympics have been postponed, and many of our sport hosting events have been canceled. Each year, the ministry invests $10 million into our athletes through Quest for Gold and sport hosting. Despite these postponements and cancellations, this money will still be available. What will get us all through this is knowing that in 2021, our Canadian flags will top podiums and medal counts. And I assure you that Ontario is committed to making sure that we continue to support that environment. I want to thank all Ontario athletes like Erica Weeb in my city of Ottawa who helped our country lead the International Olympic Committee decision. Similarly, if you receive a Celebrate, OAC, OCAF, or Trillium grant, that money will flow. We want to make sure that even if you have to cancel your event this year, you will have a triumphant return in 2021. Our festivals and events are lifebloods of our communities, and I want to make sure when Ontario is ready to socialize in person again, that our event organizers are ready to welcome them with open arms. We will invest this year almost $200 million to support these efforts. And finally, if you are a local library, community museum, or one of the government's agencies and attractions, your money will flow, and it will flow very quickly, so that when it is safe to do so, you can open your doors again to the public. These 10 action items have been and will continue to be executed by the ministry in addition to the economic steps taken yesterday by our government. These measures include making available $10 billion in support for people and businesses through tax and other deferrals to improve cash flow over the coming months. Specifically, we will be making available $6 billion by providing 5 months of interest and penalty relief for businesses to file and make payments for the majority of provincially administered taxes. Over $1.8 billion by deferring the upcoming June 30th quarterly municipal remittance of education property tax to school boards by 90 days, which will provide municipalities the flexibility to in turn provide property tax deferrals to residents and businesses while ensuring school boards continue to receive their funding. We'll be making available $1.9 billion by the WSIB, allowing employers to defer payments for up to 6 months. We'll be setting time-of-use electricity prices for eligible customers at the lowest rate, 24 hours a day for 45 days to support people for their increased daytime electricity usage. To help businesses during this crisis, the government is proposing to double the employer health tax exemption in 2020. Through this change, about 57,000 private sector employers would pay less EHT in 2020, including about 30,000 more who would not pay EHT this year. This amounts to a tax cut of $355 million. Also, the government is taking aim at regional economic disparities through the launch of a proposed new Regional Opportunities Investment Tax Credit, which would be available to eligible businesses that build, renovate, or acquire qualifying commercial and industrial buildings in designated regions of the province, saving up to $45,000 a year. Finally, we will be enhancing funding by $148 million for charities and not-for-profits. I know there will be many questions about how all of this impacts you, and I will be trying in earnest to answer everyone as quickly as possible. I want you to know that the measures outlined by the Finance Minister are the first phase in what will likely be additional responses to various parts of this public health crisis and the economic fallout. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be on here today, as well as for your patience and understanding. You have my commitment that I will not stop working on your behalf. And before I conclude my remarks, I would remind all of you that this is a public health crisis, and if you have any questions, the best place to get timely and accurate information is ontario.ca/COVID-19. In addition, having spoken with many of you on this phone, I recognize that this can be a very anxiety-driven period of time that can wreak havoc on our collective and individual mental health. For mental health support during this period, please go to ontario.ca/mental health to see where you can receive support in your communities. With that, I'll send it back to you, Tim, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I got to say, you have really responded in a major way to the questions we had at last week's call. I mean, I was trying to keep notes there. You must announce about a dozen different initiatives across the sectors, from the Tourism Development and Recovery Fund, the Ontario Live, Destination Ontario enhancements. I heard the total budget was going up from $200 million to $1.65 billion. So off the start, thank you so much for responding to what you heard last week and from your calls across the province, going to the Premier and Cabinet and getting all of this for the sector. There was a lot that you rolled out there. Just a quick question before I go to Beth Potter, will that information get out to the folks listening here on the call so they can see which programs best apply to them?
Absolutely. My communications team is actually getting this to be rolled out so that those on the phone can best access these programs. Again, if you have an immediate concern and you don't get on the call today, don't worry about that. You can go to minister.macleod at ontario.ca. Our team is monitoring 24/7 what's been coming in, and we just want to make sure that everybody on the call is supported some way, somehow. The challenge with this, obviously, is that we're ever evolving, but we recognize that liquidity is key. We also recognize that planning out is also something that we have to do. So I've been fortunate. I said it before, and Josh is on the call with me, CEO from the ROM. I have the benefit of having the best senior leadership team probably in the world through our agencies and our attractions, through my deputy, Nancy Matthews, and her team, as well as Destination Ontario and Ontario Creates, and we're all in this together. I have 13 industry-led tables, one multi-sectoral table, and of course daily cabinet meetings and weekly ministerial meetings with my federal and provincial counterparts. In addition, today I'm going to start a virtual tour of Ontario in all of our 13 regional tourism areas, and including my colleagues as well, so they can hear directly from the small business owner to the local artist to the community athletes and our museums and libraries. So just trying to make sure that we're in constant contact with everybody and listening to them, and then adapting our programs to respond to their immediate needs.
Like I said, it's breathtaking results in such a short period of time, and Premier Ford was right when he put you in to be the fighter for folks in the heritage, sport, tourism, and culture industries. Minister, thank you for that eightfold increase in the budget and the quick response. Again, folks listening, you're listening to Minister Lisa MacLeod, her telephone town hall to the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture. We are well over 1,000 people listening. If you have a question to ask Minister, please hit 3. Again, please hit 3 on your phone. We'll try to get on as many calls as possible. Our first question is going to come from one of our guest panelists, Beth Potter. Beth is the President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association. Beth, what question do you have for the Minister?
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. And Minister, thank you for outlining the additional items that were in yesterday's economic statement that may not have been front and center. This is not the first time our industry has faced a public health crisis. We know that the recovery period is going to be prolonged. I'm just wondering if you could perhaps speak to the Tourism Development Fund and the fact that you've tripled the budget there, and how businesses can access that during this not so much recovery period, but more relief period.
Thanks very much, Beth. First of all, let me say thank you for your ongoing advice to me. You're my first call this morning at 7 a.m., and we do text back and forth, and you being on the front lines with the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario and feeding that information to me and the ministry, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful also that you sit on so many of our tables that we've established, so thank you for that. Look, I after speaking with Glenn Shackleton last week after this forum, and the liquidity that they require in order to stay alive, I spoke with my deputy immediately, and I said, we've got to increase this fund, and we have to make it more about recovery and salvaging what we've got, because my view is we need to be there when this is over. And we don't know how long this will last, so how do we provide some level of support to as many people as possible? So we decided to do that. So again, we increased it for our 2020 allocation, which will start on April 1st, from $500,000 to $1.5 million. And we will be rolling out that information in the days to come, and we'll be doing it as quickly as possible so that people like Glenn and others from across Ontario will be able to communicate directly with the ministry and get the support that they need. This is absolutely critical, because if we don't have those operators in business when we're ready to welcome the world back to Ontario, there won't be a whole lot to do. So we've got to respond in real time, and I want to thank everyone. So these forums are very helpful for me, because it gets the ideas flowing, and it allows us to look at what our cash within the ministry looks like, and how do we repurpose it, especially after we've seen it grow from up to $200 million now to a $1.65 billion budget.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Minister. Let's switch channels a little bit here to sport. David Shoemaker, who is the CEO and the Secretary General of the Canadian Olympic Committee, has joined us as one of our panelists. David, with the cancellation of the Olympics, I don't think we ever imagined we'd see that. What's your question for Minister MacLeod?
Yeah, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Minister. You're right. We didn't ever imagine we'd be in this position on so many levels. But, Minister, you referred to this in your remarks. The International Olympic Committee just this week announced the postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics to help stop the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. How will your government support Ontario's amateur athletes and their respective provincial sports organizations as they cope, extend their training periods and in effect suspend them for the time being for another year?
Well, as I mentioned, we invest about $10 million to sport hosting events in Quest for Gold. In normal times, if those events weren't to continue or training would be disrupted, that money may not be still available. We're going to continue to flow it, because, again, it goes back to that question, where will we be when this is all done? And we want to make sure that whether you're an artist or an athlete or a tourist attraction, that you're still there, so that when we welcome the world, or we want to showcase Ontario to the rest of the world, that we're still there. So we're going to continue to flow money to the provincial sport organizations at the amateur level. So your Soccer Ontario, your Lacrosse Ontario, your Baseball Ontario will continue to get its funding, just as always. We're going to make sure that we look at the opportunities of 2021. Like, for example, it's not just Ontario being impacted by this. So where nationally and internationally have games been postponed, where they may not have capacity in facilities, in places like Halifax, or maybe even in London, England, and can we attract those if they've been postponed a year? And so we're actively looking at that and looking at partnerships. And then finally, the Quest for Gold. We want to make sure that our elite athletes in the province of Ontario that are in line to go to the Olympics, or participate in the Paralympics, or go to a World Championships, still have access to that funding. So we're committed to working with you, David, and so many others, including our athletes, to see how we best leverage that money in a period that it really requires it. But I did mean what I said, and I think it extends to almost everything that we do within this ministry. We're all really about pride of people and pride of place. And part of this recovery is making sure that when we get out, we're able to assemble again, that we're able to do so to support our Olympic athletes to attend the local festival, and go to a local hockey game. And so that's what we really want to do, and I'm committed to working with you guys to see how we can best leverage and get through this. Thank you.
Minister, thank you. And David, thanks for the question. We have over 1,250 people now on the line. If you want to ask a question, Minister MacLeod, press 3 on your phone. We'll try to get through as many as we can. We're going until 11:30. I'm going to ask Jim Mercopoulos and Josh Bastis to hold on for a sec. We're going to go to a call because, Minister, in your opening remarks, you talked about a very innovative program and enhanced funding for Ontario Live. So we're going to go to a live caller here, Eric, who has a question about Ontario Live.
Yes, we have our first live caller. Christine, you're joining us live. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Minister MacLeod, for putting this on. I have a question on how to access Ontario Live for musicians and artists. Is there a specific website that they will go to? And a lot of musicians play in clubs. which are now closed, and it's cash or it's door, how do they prove what kind of money they've lost?
Well, that's a good question, and I know Music Canada is working on that, so I would encourage you to speak with Graham Henderson or Stuart Johnson, who's with SEMA. The two of them I know are doing different surveys, but I think along the same lines, so I'd encourage you to feed into one of those organizations so that they can track it. And I know I mentioned her earlier, Miranda Mulholland is a very effective advocate on the Canadian music scene, and she's from Toronto, and she's been telling everyone, keep your receipts, understand what you've lost, and that has had an indelible impact on me. So the idea and the notion of Ontario Live will come forward next week. We will roll it out, and it will be industry-led, supported by our government. It will also extend, though, to film and television. It will extend to our attractions, and it will extend to, where possible, making our arts galleries as well as museum digitally. It, I think, serves two purposes. I have always said that this ministry has a double bottom line and a dual mandate. The first is we should support the cultural fabric of the province of Ontario and our social impact in all of our respective sectors. But at the same time, we are a massive economic generator. And just before this crisis hit, we were about to announce that the combined economic imprint of these sectors was $74 billion. And so looking at Ontario Live, understanding two things have happened. One is many of our artists, many of our creators, all of our attractions have taken an enormous hit economically during this period of time. But at the same time, we also have people that are in self-isolation or social distancing. They're at home. They're going through content. So how do we make that content available via an online marketplace so that that we are allowing our producers and creators to make money while at the same time providing that cultural input for those who are at home. So we'll have more details on that. I just wanted to share it because I think this is going to be a really great success story for us, and I'm looking forward to rolling it out, and I'm really proud that we're investing in this.
Christine, are you still on the line? Yeah, Mister. I'd ask folks that make the calls into, what was great about last calls, we heard from people everywhere in the province, from large businesses, institutions, municipalities, to small mom-and-pop operations. So when you ask the minister a question, if you don't mind saying your name, what part of the province you're from, and your business, that just really helps us to see how broad this sector is and best understand the question. Okay, Minister, we're going to go now to one of our panelists, Jim Markopoulos. Jim is the Vice President of Cinespace Film Studios. I know, Minister, announcing that your budget's gone up 8 times, from $200 million to $1.6.5 billion.
Sorry, Tim. It was $1.4 billion to 1.6. You are making me look pretty good there, buddy.
I'm trying to scramble the notes here. Well, anyway, it was a substantial enhancement. So there's new programs, program enhancements, and a big part of it was cutting red tape, helping businesses get access to funds for tax credits, like film tax credits, faster. So perfect time for Jim Markopoulos, who's a VP of Cinepace Film Studios, to ask his question. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Minister, once again for your very proactive and focused leadership during this crisis on all of your files, not just ours. But I know I speak for the entire film, TV, and digital media sector. We're talking about 40,000 people when I say that we're all very grateful that you're the minister responsible for our industry at this time, more than ever before. So thank you.
Thank you.
As you know, Minister, productions across Ontario have followed the direction of Ontario's Chief Medical Officer and have all paused their productions to help stop the spread of COVID-19. However, we benefit from a very unique competitive advantage through Ontario's film and TV tax credit. You and your government have already given us unprecedented tax credit stability, and even during this crisis, you've maintained that stability. However, given the COVID-19 situation is such a fluid one, it just bears repeating that question. Can access to these tax credits be maintained as we all try to weather this storm?
Well, absolutely, and thank you, Jim. And for those who may not know, Jim is the chair of our TV and Film Advisory Panel. We weekly right now because just in the words of Jim Diodati, don't panic. plan, and so we're continuing to meet, which is really important. Something we did yesterday is we are going to be revising regulations so that we can allow contract and freelance workers to receive Ontario's 3 refundable film and TV tax credits. So we're not only stable, we're actually starting to enhance these tax credits. We want to make sure that we're in global competition when this issue is over, and we want to make sure that we streamline them so that creators get their money quicker at a time that they need it. I would be remiss, though, Jim, if I didn't say thank you to you and to others in the film industry for doing 2 things since we met last week. The first is all of our film and television production unions that are working with the skilled trades collected equipment for our hospitals because they weren't using their masks, their gowns, eyewear, and they made a substantial contribution to our healthcare system, and I'm grateful for that. The second thing is, I know that you've all been working behind the scenes with one another, yourself and Jonathan Ahi and others, to look at space that you have that we might be able to use, whether it's for warehousing or for other healthcare needs during this time. And that generosity is something that makes me proud. One of the things that's come out of this has been this Ontario spirit where you're seeing industry really step up to help particularly our healthcare workers at this time. But I wanted to say thanks on those 2 counts, and at the same time just renew our commitment to the film and TV industry. You were growing, and you were growing at a fast rate before all this came to a halt, and we want to make sure that when this is over that we're ready to support you to make sure that film and television are being not only filmed here, but that we continue to attract talent as well.
You're joining the telephone town hall by Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, Culture, Industries, Lisa MacLeod. If you have a question to ask the Minister, please hit 3 on your phone. We will try to get you on the line. And I do ask our callers to let us know your name, where you're from, and your business as part of your question. In fact, Minister, just like you and I both have a huge love for tourism, proud of our home areas. The next call we have coming is regarding the announcement you made around tourism attraction funding.
Sure.
So go ahead and cue that up, Eric.
We have our next live caller. It's going to be Darcy. Darcy, welcome. You're joining us live.
Thank you very much. My name is Darcy Colleen. I'm the Executive Director of the Scotiabank Contact Photography Festival here in Toronto. First of all, I just have to say thank you for everything that the Ministry is doing, everything that the Ministry has done. This festival would not be what it is without the Ministry. And I can't imagine how hard your job is now, so thank you for taking the time. Contact is one of the largest festivals in the province and launches its website on April 1st. With about 150 exhibitions, and then the exhibitions are scheduled to open in May, and they will open as public safety is assured. My question, I want to try to be as brief as possible, relates to the Celebrate Ontario program, and when and what type of announcement will be made. As Contact has already incurred hundreds of thousands of dollars on its blockbuster programs. Thank you.
Well, listen, Darcy, thank you so much. And you'll recall one of the first calls I made as minister was to tell Contact that they were getting a Celebrate grant. I want to congratulate you for all the great work that you're doing. We are going to continue to support you. So obviously some times have changed as a result of when we were going to initially roll that out, but the ministry is working on that as we speak. We're typically oversubscribed in Celebrate, so we're just making sure that we can get money to as many people as possible during this period of time, and we want to continue to support some of the most iconic festivals in the world that happen right across the province of Ontario. So we'll make sure that my staff reach out to you, Darcy. So I'll have maybe if Manveer is listening on the line. Manveer, you've just been tasked with contacting Darcy today and working with him. And the same goes for everybody. If you have a Celebrate question, just send it into minister.macleod@ontario.ca. Again, minister.macleod@ontario.ca. We're going to continue to do intake in terms of our questions and try and support you as best we possibly can. So we'll make sure that information in the new fiscal on April 1st starts to flow on those particular granting programs.
Great. Darcy, thank you for that question. Very practical. Thanks for keeping it tight and also letting us know who you are and who you represent. Minister Lisa MacLeod invited 4 additional panelists who are hardworking leaders in the sector. Beth Potter, Presidency of the Tourism Industry Association, David Shoemaker, who's a CEO and Secretary General of the Canadian Olympic Committee, Jim Mercopoulos, who's a Vice President of Cinespace Film Studios. And our next question, Minister, is going to come from our fourth panelist. It's Josh Bassages. Josh is the Director and CEO of the Royal Ontario Museum. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Minister. And like others, I just want to say how much we appreciate the leadership that you're bringing to the sector in this very difficult time. The Royal Ontario Museum has now been closed for nearly 2 weeks to the public, and as everybody can imagine, an extended state of emergency will have a significant impact on our institution. And I know that this is a concern shared by many other small, medium, and large cultural organizations and attractions across the province. So my question, Minister, relates to what we've been talking a fair bit about on this call, which is recovery. We will get to the other side of COVID-19, and we need to be trying to be strong when we get there, as you've mentioned. So my question is, how will Ontario's government help to attract visitors to return to our cultural and other institutions after the state of emergency is lifted, as this will be critical to jumpstarting both our own organizations and, of course, the broader economy?
Well, thanks, Josh, and thank you very much for all your time and attention. For those of you on the line that don't know this, I love working out of the ROM because Josh is such a great leader. He's got a great team, and of course, one of the most iconic museums in the world, and probably one of the best-run museums in the world. So, thank you very much for that. In terms of the recovery piece, that's why we started right away. And I don't know if Lisa Lavecchia from Destination Ontario is on the line. We probably have one of the brightest, most talented marketing geniuses working for us at Destination Ontario, and she's very responsive. And her and I, as well as the rest of the ministry team, have been working with industry as well to position Ontario and find the opportunities. And she's looking each day at the data and where normalcy has returned and the trends where we expect tourism to go. We're looking at all of those opportunities. So part of the creation of Ontario Live is to make sure like the ROM or the AGO or the Science Centre or Science North have an opportunity to put some of their attractions or exhibits online through Ontario Live, while we still promote our musicians and our artists and our attractions, and then at the same time have a marketing campaign built around that. And so one of the things we want to do is let people know that when it's safe to do so again and to assemble, we're going to be here and ready for you. And so we're starting with that marketing campaign in addition to Ontario Live in order to support that. And we're going to be very aggressive in trying to encourage people to come to Ontario. At the end of the day, once we get through this, we're still going to be a safe jurisdiction. We're still going to have a lower dollar than the United States, and we still are the world in one province. And people may decide that they might not want to go to certain different places in the world, given the differing reactions and responses to COVID-19, but certainly we still have that world in one province to offer. And whether that's Caravana or a Highland Games, Greek Fest, or Taste of the Danforth, we have got it all, and we're going to make sure that we continue to market this province to the rest of Canada and to the rest of the world.
Minister, we're now going to move to the world of sport. I know as a hockey mom, as the MPP who brought Rowan's Law to the province to protect against concussions in sport, this has been a big focus for you in your career in public life. Our first question, Eric, please tee it up regarding sports marketing.
We do have a live caller. Scott, you're joining us live. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Minister MacLeod. It's Scott Open. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Greater Toronto Hockey League. I appreciate all the work that you've done so far to date on this file, and particularly the work you did around Rowan's Law as well. It's made a dramatic change and an important change in sport. What I'd like to ask about is a number of our stakeholders are concerned that when we are on the other side of this, that there will be a reluctance from parents to involve their children in youth activities, youth sport, because of the concerns of or the reluctance to join given the way this particular virus has spread. And I'm wondering if the ministry has put any thought to any campaigns campaigns around getting kids back involved in sport once we're on the other side of this?
Yeah, great question. We were to be bringing a sport strategy to the province, which obviously will be changing. So we are actively working, and not just in sport, in the entire ministry. We were going to be releasing the strategy that has obviously changed as a result of this. One of the things that I want to make sure we continue to do is to support youth sports. And I had a wonderful call last night I'm from Ottawa, and I spoke with the Ottawa 67s last night about how do we do that? How do we have that sense of pride in sport again? And I think it's really important, as Alan Reid once said to me, the two most televised events in CBC's history. Number one was Canada versus the United States in 2010 when we won the gold medal, and the second was Gord Downey's last concert with the Tragically Hip. So when you look at those two metrics, what people are consuming, what they want to watch, it is within this ministry. And so we are going to be building a strategy on the go forward that won't only be about recovery, it'll be about stability, and it will be about long-term planning. So we were looking at 2020 to 2025 in each one of these sectors, and we are going to continue to work once we get through this together with our stakeholders to see what will work. But as a hockey mom myself, as a hockey player, ring-out player, I'm absolutely going to tell you that sport will be a very big and important part of our recovery, not just economically, but as a society as a whole.
Staying on the sports theme, Minister, I'm going to go to Eric. Has another question around support for amateur sports in general.
Our next caller is coming up, and it is going to be Lacey. Lacey, welcome to the Town Hall. Please go ahead.
Thanks so much. Lacey Rigg from Timbers and Timmins in the city of Timmins, Northern Ontario. Thank you again to Tim and Minister MacLeod for all your support during this difficult time. I know we're all struggling in each avenues of our province. My question is, for amateur sports such as junior A hockey, minor hockey, skiing, will there be a recovery fund for them to access?
At this point, we're just looking at how we allocate the funds within the ministry for the rapid response to make sure that there are people that are still being able to stay in business, which is about the Tourism Development Fund. And then looking at, in terms of sport, the two big funds we have is in terms of sport hosting and the Quest for Gold. So at this moment, it would be premature to say that, but I am open to all suggestions. So if you look at the 10 initiatives that I've announced today, they came from you. They came from all of you on this phone who have come out with an idea, because I recognize everyone's struggling, and I know that we have to do two things. One is we have to keep you all, whole as much as we possibly can, and at the same time make sure that when we're through this, that there's a forum for each of you. So obviously we're looking at these things, and as we revise the sports plan that we were going to come out with as a result of this emerging healthcare crisis and then the economic fallout to it, totally looking at how we can best support our sport recreation facilities and teams across the province.
Folks, you're listening to the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, Lisa MacLeod, running her now second telephone at Town Hall. If you have a question for the Minister, please hit 3 on your phone. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Minister, I'm going to go back to Josh Passages from the ROM in a moment, but I'm going to play the moderator card here, if you don't mind. I got my own question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Sure. Look, I guess. Listen, I've known you for a long time. You got great energy and enthusiasm in your voice. Number one, you got to be exhausted. What's happening with your day-to-day? Let folks know what Lisa MacLeod's schedule looks like. And then I've got a special whisper through my door here in my studio from my daughter Miller. How's your daughter Victoria doing?
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so I'll answer with Victoria first. We have been using the online education tools so that we keep her busy, and I went out and her basketball was deflated, so we bought a few little extra soccer balls and basketballs and footballs, so she's still doing that. And of course, just like everyone her age, she's watching a lot of TikTok. The one interesting thing is obviously I'm home a lot more right now, so I know what she's eating, which is important because there's only so much in terms of microwavable meals that I can stomach letting her eat. So that's been good. In terms of my day, there'll be people on this call like Beth, for example, or Terry Mundell from the Hoteliers Association, or others. No, I start my day. Well, I usually wake up around 4:35. My first calls of the day usually start around 7. So I have calls, individual calls, and then conference calls till 9, and then usually around 9 o'clock until about 4, we have one of those 13 industry tables, or a federal, provincial, territorial, ministerial meeting, or a meeting with my colleagues, and then usually between 4 and 8 at night, we convene as a cabinet, whether it's between 4 and 5:30 or it goes a little bit longer, and then a debrief with my team till usually about 9 o'clock at night. So it's been around the clock a lot. But I'm trying and choosing to see the opportunity that this will present itself, and how what the light looks like at the end of the tunnel, and so we're absolutely entertaining all kinds of different ideas. But my days usually, I would say, the work starts around 7 in the morning till about 9 p.m. And I know that the telephone town hall may not be for everyone, but it's the best way for me to get to everybody to communicate what our ministry is doing. And then it's also very helpful when you send in emails to our office, because we track those and ensure that that we're understanding everything from the fallout in a fishing lodge in the north to the Toronto Symphony to Blues Fest in Ottawa, and making sure that we understand what impact it has for everybody. So this forum is useful for me in those two regards. One is I can share more broadly with what the ministry is doing in terms of how we're trying to deal with the salvation and recovery of this situation, and at the same time remind folks that even if you can't ask your question on this telephone town hall, you can still email me at minister.macleod@ontario.ca or call the office anytime. We're checking the messages all the time.
Well, like I said, right leader in the right job during very difficult times. Thanks for that peek behind the curtain of what the day-to-day looks like there at the ministry and how you're making decisions. And I'll have Miller send a message or whatever the heck you do over TikTok to Victoria. All right, Josh Bastiges from the ROM, you've got another question for Minister MacLeod. Please go ahead.
Yes, Tim, and actually I want to pick up on what the minister was just talking about with regard to her daughter at home. And people all across the province are self-isolating to contain the pandemic, and they're stuck there and they're trying to figure out what to do. And we've talked a fair bit about online resources and web-based resources, and I would just say that representing an institution in the cultural industry, that we've seen a dramatic increase in people accessing our collections, our online experiences, and learning opportunities. And frankly, I think that we and many of our other colleague institutions have a lot more that we could be doing to help the people there sitting at home trying to figure out how to spend their time and engage in learning and education. So my question is, Minister, I know you're doing a lot on this front, and we want to hear a little bit more about how you're supporting cultural institutions to harness and extend the online engagement opportunities.
Yeah, so this. Thank you very much, Josh. And you, obviously, one of my all-time favorite places to visit is the ROM, and I know that you guys have a great online collection, as does Stefan over at the AGO, and so many others, like our local community museums. We spoke a lot last week with the public libraries and how they have digitalized much of their collections, and so that really was the idea behind Ontario Live, and making sure that we can bring bring culture to the digital marketplace, and so people can experience that when they're in social isolation, and at the same time perhaps create a revenue stream for our cultural assets in the province of Ontario, and our tourism assets in the province of Ontario. So we're working at that, and I know as you would know, Josh, early on we decided the attractions and the agencies within the ministry would start working together like they hadn't done before, and we started this work, thankfully. Months ago. It was almost prophetic, actually, that we decided to start doing this and collaborating to a level that the agencies and attractions in the ministry had done before. And so under the leadership of my deputy, Nancy Matthews, we have been able to sort of keep a list of all of those digital assets that we have within this ministry, and so it's making the life of Destination Ontario a little bit easier as we compile these opportunities for Ontario Live. And as I said, our initial investment into this with the community is $150,000, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll continue to let industry take the lead and our agencies and attractions, but certainly we want to make sure that we continue to support this. I've said this before, and I say it again, that the creative industries will be the next wave of industrial revolution, and I believe that because creators are on the verge, whether that's in animation, film, TV, music, whether that's our attractions in every rural community throughout Ontario. So we just have to make sure that as we go through this terrible period of change and crisis, that we keep our eye on the ball, where the puck is going to be. And if I can support you in any way to stabilize or to support you in other ways so that you're there when we get through this, that's what we want to do. And so Ontario Live, I think, is going to be a very exciting tool in order for us to do that.
All right, let's try to get through in these last 7 minutes, some rapid fire. So, Eric, I'm going to give you 2 questions in a row from our callers. I see we've got one for museums. We'll go with that, and then tee up the one for campgrounds right after that. I ask the callers to please keep your questions tight. Tell us where you're from, your business, and we'll try to get through as many as we can these last few minutes. Thanks.
All right, Tim, first up we have Michael joining us. Michael, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Ms. MacLeod, for your leadership and for your calming reflection. So basically, I'm really excited to hear about the museum funds that will be released early. That's really excellent. And so I'm assuming that is referring to CMOG and Hodge. But we're also curious, you've touched on digital and special museum relief, and we'd love to know more about what that will be. But also, how will museums that don't currently get operational funding, how will they benefit, and will they now benefit from some kind of relief in that way?
Thank you very much for that. So, 2 things. Go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot to say where I'm from. Sorry.
And tell me what your museum is.
Yeah, Mississippi Valley Textile Museum in Elmont. I'm on the council for the Ontario Museum Association.
No kidding. So the Textile Museum, forgive me, is that where James Daismith's stuff is?
Yeah, we're not far from there. We're just next to the museum. Yeah.
Very cool. I've got some fun things to talk to about on that particular museum, but not for today. But it's it's great that you asked that question, because our community museums are often the lifeblood of our rural communities. Even here in Nepean, we have our own Nepean Museum in the city of Ottawa, which reminds us of our local history and of prominent figures who helped create the communities that we live in today. So we're going to continue to support you and continue to flow your money through CMOG. The other area, and of course we're happy to hear if you have any digital compilations that you would like to exhibit on Ontario Live, please send them to Minister.MacLeod at ontario.ca. One area that we're really excited about and we've been working on, but now we're going to have to flesh it out a little bit more, is our Explore and Experience package, where we want to ensure that community museums across the province of Ontario, as well as our attractions within the ministry, are available to youth in Ontario. And so we're working on a program to actively flow to you some support so that we can encourage, when it's safe to do so, parents to take their kids to museums and other attractions throughout the province. And so that was announced in the last fall economic statement, and we have now a sizable budget to be able to put toward that, and we are working on that as we speak, so that when we are ready and willing to go, and it's safe to do so, you're able to open your doors to more youth than ever before.
All right, Eric, let's go right to the campground question, and then we've got one more after that, Minister, on theaters. Let's try to squeeze them in.
All right, we're going to Connor now. Connor, welcome. You're joining us live.
Hi, Minister MacLeod. Thank you for making the time of the week. Hi, how's it going?
That's pretty good, thanks.
So I'm Connor Hamilton, as I don't know, camping in Ontario. I'm just curious, we've got some pretty major issues with snowbirds coming to coming back to the country to isolate. Campgrounds were possibly referred as a business under the list, but it's a little vague. So we're hoping if we can get some possible direction on whether or not campgrounds are to open up and provide spaces for isolation for the rest of the country, as we've got municipalities now enacting their own borders rules that might be consistent with the province including a problem.
Great question. So I will work with you offline on this so that we can get some clarity. A very good question, and I know that these are arising as we develop new plans and protocols and measures. Sometimes there are additional questions and there are gray areas. What I will say in the meantime, and I neglected to do this at the opening, is actually talk about that business line that each of you can access that will answer these questions on a case-by-case basis. So that number is 1-866-266-3334, and that will pertain to what should be closed and what can remain open. So again, it's 1-866-266-3334. And if you don't mind, Connor, we'll assign Brooke in my office, Brooke Timpson, to reach out to you, and she'll call you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Question on theaters, and then I'll go to the Minister for wrap-up comments.
We have Brad joining us now. Brad, welcome. You're joining us live.
Hi, thank you again, and thank you, Minister, and to your team who have been working very hard as well. My name is Brad. I work with Soul Pepper Theatre in Toronto. Many of the great programs, and it's wonderful to hear that we're thinking about the future, are industry-focused and tourism-focused, which are very important sectors. I just have a question around the not-for-profit and the charitable arts and culture sector. And it's great to hear that the Ontario Arts Council will continue to roll out its funding. However, the OAC represents a very small percentage for most charities and most cultural organizations. I'm just wondering about recovery packages as they pertain to ticket sales. We saw in the Toronto Star that just looking at Toronto live performing companies, we're looking at about $500 million in lost ticket revenue. Any thoughts around recovery? And I'm sure, again, across the province, this is an issue for many live performing arts organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not really just theater. You're right. It's about live performing arts, whether that's concerts. I've been working a lot with Aaron Benjamin from Canadian Live Music. So obviously, the measures that we've taken as a government yesterday and through our ministry today are aimed at liquidity and aimed at immediacy. And we're now going to start looking at a longer term, as we've said, both in sport and in tourism. And so I'd be interested to hear your recommendations and what that might cost. But we're going to continue, as I said, in terms of the Ontario Arts Council, the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, Celebrate Ontario, and the Trillium Foundation, to continue to roll out that almost $200 million in festival and community supports, regardless if those events are continuing on or not, because we recognize the stability will be required. But I'm happy to take this offline and have a conversation with you and perhaps a number of the other theater organizations. I think it's worth also noting that last week I had the opportunity to meet with Josh, but the other big seven cultural attractions and festivals in the city of Toronto. So along with TIFF and Soul Pepper and others, and the Symphony and the Opera. And so just making sure that when we get out of this, that there's a way for us to find a level of support for you. So these are things we're working on. And as I mentioned at the outset, the finance minister did announce a $17 billion package yesterday, but that will be phase one as we move through this. And as the public health crisis subsides, it's the economic recovery that we'll all start to look at. So thank you very much for that question, and really appreciate the food for thought right there.
Minister, I just want to say 1,250 people on the call, and we couldn't get all the questions we had, but thank you for being so transparent. I'll give the second last word and give you the last word as our minister. I just want to say thanks for listening to last week's call and now returning, delivering with $200 million in additional funding to fight for the people that you work hard for each and every day. And I'll tell you a couple of happy kids here at Miller and Maitland who are now making notes, because we are going to get through this. We'll get back on our feet. So they're ready to get back on the field and back on the ice and get out and about, visit our local museum and library and tourism attractions. So a few excited folks in the Hudak family once we get through this. Minister, concluding remarks, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Tim, and thank you to all of you who took the time to spend the last hour with me. I want to say thanks to my team who are working very hard in these difficult circumstances. And then, of course, obviously, convey my gratitude to our frontline healthcare workers, our pharmacists, and those who were stocking the shelves and selling our products in our grocery stores. I know this is a very tense time for everyone on this line. And, again, I believe that our recovery as a society will start here through the economics and the cultural fabric of this ministry, and that's why we're going to continue to work hard for you, and I will continue to advocate for you. Again, we have announced 10 different initiatives within the ministry today that I think bear repeating, that the Tourism Development Fund will be changed to the Tourism Development and Recovery Fund with a triple increase to $1.5 million. We are going to be launching a digital online marketplace called Ontario Live with an initial investment of $150,000 to hopefully roll out next week. Destination Ontario is actively working on a marketing program to make sure that when we're ready to accept visitors and it's safe to do so, that we are known to be doing so, that the restaurants, pubs, and bars across Ontario will be able to sell and deliver unopened alcohol at their establishments, that we are working with the Ministry of Health, Long-Term Care, and Community and Social Services in the event that our hotel spaces are needed. And there's an earmark of $341 million required if that happens. To our TV and film industry, we are streamlining the tax credits and allowing contract and freelance workers to receive our three tax credits. We are opening up the $7 million Ontario Music Fund to make sure we get more money into emerging artists' hands as quickly as possible. We are going to continue to invest the $10 million in our athletes through Quest for Gold and sport hosting events. We are going to ensure that Celebrate, OAC, OCAF, and Trillium money continues to flow, and that's almost $200 million in 2020. And finally, to our local libraries, community museums, and our government agencies and attractions, the money will continue to flow. Now, just three final things I'd like to say. One is the number that I gave before the business line was wrong. I've been given the wrong number, but I'm going to give you the right one now. That business line is 1-888-444-3659. Again, that business line is 1-888-444-3659. Finally, for the most relevant and up-to-date and accurate information on COVID-19, please go to ontario.ca/COVID-19. Again, it's ontario.ca/COVID-19. And I know that there are so many people right now struggling with anxiety and frightened. There is community supports in your communities, so that can be accessed at ontario.ca/mental health. Again, ontario.ca/mental health. And as always, please provide my office with as much information as you possibly can about how you are being impacted, and we'll try to get timely information to you as quickly as possible. And my email address, again, is minister.macleod@ontario.ca. And with that, I want to say thanks to the 1,251 people who joined this call today from across the province, from the small tourism operator in Northern Ontario to the large theater in downtown Toronto, to the festival that's been going on for decades in the city of Ottawa. You are what makes Ontario great, and I know these are tense times. We are going to get through this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to plan and prepare for recovery together. So thank you all very much, and Tim, thank you for being a great host.
My pleasure, and thank you for those very inspiring words, Ms. MacLeod, to end this year. Infectious sense of optimism that we will get through this, and the better times ahead is really welcome voice. I think to all of us personally, as well as what we look out for businesses on this call. Minister, fantastic job, and to the 1,251 folks listening, thank you for taking the time. Great questions. Many thanks also to Beth Potter, David Shoemaker, Jim Mercopoulos, and Josh Passages as part of our guests on this call, leaders in the sectors. Folks, the questions that we couldn't get to will help inform the Ministry's communications and part of their outreach program. The Minister went over twice the 10 initiatives that she has delivered for the sector to help through tough times and bridge to better times ahead. That information will also be available from your Ministry liaison with the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture. Thank you, folks, for joining this call today. All the best in the time ahead. Well, I look forward to better times soon. Take care.
Thank you, Tim.